ask questions as we go. All right, here we are. Hello and welcome to the preview webinar for our upcoming Leadership Conclave. We are looking at trends, stuff that could affect us in 2025. If you haven't met me before, I'm Zoe Routh. I am your friendly neighborhood Canadian Australian facilitator, and I am very excited to see you all next week, where we're going to take a deep dive into strategy and coming up with some fabulous experiments to make 2025 awesome. 2025 sounds like very futuristic, doesn't it? It feels like we were still in 2000 not so long ago, but here we are, 2025. And how I want to run today is I've got 7 major trends to have a look at. We're going to look at specifically in some of them how it might apply to your particular sector. I'm open to taking your questions, concerns, interrogations, observations as we go along or towards the end. All up to you. So if I haven't met you before, hello. And for those I'm familiar with, it's lovely to see you again. And for those listening to the recording, make sure you're listening on time and a half to save you time and energy. All right, so let's get into it. I think the couple things to note when it comes to strategy, how we do strategy has really changed over the last few years because our world has exponentially changed. There's a whole bunch of different factors at play that force us to do strategy differently. In the past, long ago, actually not that long ago, maybe 20 years, we used to do strategy in a 3 to 5 year time frame. It's kind of like, what are we going to do for the next 5 years? And we came up with a plan. In fact, strategy was all about the plan. It was called strategic planning. And it was very much a project management type of affair. You know, let's do these big things, and in 5 years, we'll look at what can we do next. And it turns out that was useful up to a point when things were a lot more contained, less volatile, and less steady. But now things are volatile, things are uncertain. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is very interconnected in our global, hyper social medialized, that's not a word, world. So we need to do strategy differently. What we need to do differently is we need to have strategic intentions. We need to have a big picture. We still have a vision of that's our ultimate world that we want to create, ultimate outcomes that we want to apply our business towards. We still hang on to that part. What is different is about the strategic intention. Our intention is to move our organization and the work that we do closer to that future world. That's our strategic intent. And depending on which business you're in, of course, you're going to have a different vision and a different type of world that you are looking forward to. With your strategic intention, when we do strategy, it's really thinking about, okay, that's our strategic intention. What are some projects that we can deploy that will move us towards that? And along with that, and this is being more nimble and responsive, is that we then need to apply discrete experiments. And that allows us to be responsive and nimble to changing circumstances. I'm just checking that everybody's muted. Everybody is muted now. Okay, thanks. And so the experiments is what is really quite different about strategy and something that we need to be quite intentional about in doing strategy differently. It allows us to be more responsive and able to chase down rabbits if the rabbit is an opportunity, or to run from werewolves if a werewolf appears on our strategic landscape. So at the Leadership Conclave, we're going to look at what makes a good experiment, and we're going to have a look at planning good experiments. Now, we'll get to the experiment part after we do the big picture analysis of what are the trends affecting us, which I'm going to cover today, as well as using 2 futures tools. One is called the futures triangle. We're going to use that. And we're going to use causal layered analysis, otherwise known as the iceberg, to look at some of the specific challenges we are facing in our own businesses. So once we have those 3 things done, hang on, I'll let somebody in here. Once we do the environmental scanning piece, which is what I'm showcasing today, and you might have your own to add to that, and the futures triangle and the causal layered analysis, we'll look at all that intel and we'll go, right, what experiment could we run to improve the circumstances, either responding to a challenge or taking advantage of an opportunity? And then we'll design a few experiments that we can launch in 2025 alongside our regular program of projects and strategic intention. And that is so exciting. So I did this for myself in preparation for the conclave in terms of looking at what experiments I could run next year that are in line with my big picture, long-term strategic intention. And doing that vigorously allowed me to go, hang on a minute about this experiment. I need to challenge a few things on this. And it's helped me design better experiments, better projects as a result. So all that is coming up for you at the Leadership Conclave next week. So without further ado, let's take a look at the landscape in which we find ourselves. Oh, wait, I forgot the other aspects of strategic planning. I got so excited about experiments. The other core elements that are really important for strategic planning, which most organizations get wrong, is having good measures to see if we are tracking towards our vision. And most measures are pretty terrible. It's really pluck them out of the sky, KPIs, and they don't really do anything in service to our main mission. So having good measures is really important. Doing regular reflection, pausing to check to see if our experiments are working. Is our strategy still the right overall, right intention and path? Do we need to adjust our projects, learning from our mistakes? And yeah, and then the third piece, the last piece that's super important for strategic planning is being aware of the trends and events that are happening around us. We can't just go blinkered through the business world because we get caught on the back foot and there be dragons there. Okay, now on with the show. Let's talk about some trends that we are facing. Okay, let's press play on that. All right. Yes, that's me. This is getting old, this picture now. This is me on the Larapinta Trail. A few of you, Sharon, I know, has been there with me on the Larapinta. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's a reminder that part of my work is being outdoors and getting big views to give big insights. And I very much subscribe to experiential learning, learning by doing with reflection. And I apply that to strategy as well. A key principle in this work is that we've got to imagine the future in order to create it. And a large part of strategic work is imagining the future that we want, as well as anticipating the future that we don't want and doing everything we can to avoid the one that we don't and being prepared for it if it does come to be. So we're going on a little journey. These are the practices that I put into practice for doing strategic thinking. They are explore, map, adapt. Explore is the mindset of looking beyond the horizon and having curiosity about what's out there. The skill is about mapping, and there's lots of different tools that I will share with you to help map the environment that we find ourselves. And then adapting. That's the use of experiments to really explore what's going on. So mapping is what we're going to cover today. It's environmental scanning. But first, we need to imagine a world and a world that we want to live in. Once we do that, we can ask, what the heck is going on? So this is the environmental scanning tool that I've used forever, which is called STEPO. It's an acronym that stands for social, technological, economic, environmental, political, organizational, and ethical trends. So I've done this scan for you, and I've done it broad brush, so it should apply to most organizations that are coming along, people who from different organizations that are coming along to the conclave next week. All right, let me just pop myself into the screen. Here we go. So the first one, no big surprise, is the big squeeze, the big financial squeeze. This is an economic trend, right? So you'd be a turtle hiding underneath a boulder if you didn't know this one. And what we're experiencing is reduced spending. So as people reduce their spending, some people are saving, some people are not saving because they don't have much money. People are shifting brand loyalties. So becoming more price sensitive. They'll take the no-name brand instead of the highfalutin brand. People are delaying major purchases, and side hustles are on the rise. Other things that we see in the big squeeze are housing. So in some areas, housing demand is actually cooling. Rent is going up because everybody's feeling cost of pressure. So what do? People increase their prices, including landlords. And people are shifting to housing that is smaller, more manageable, less costly to manage. So if you're in real estate, some of that's good news and some of it is not. And if you're a renter, that's not good news at all. In business, what I'm seeing is businesses are doing less investment in people development, definitely. So my business is always one of the first businesses to cut on the expense line when it comes to investing in the human assets. There's a focus on efficiencies and automation, and yep, you guessed it, job cuts. And we can only look at the universities to see that that's true. So they've got a different landscape. They've got changes in legislation restricting their access to overseas participants or students, which means their business model is under massive threat. So, yep, slashing spending, which of course cascades into the economy even further, where you have jobless people spending less money. Don't worry, there is some good news coming. Maybe not in this particular trend. And then the financial stuff, we've got mortgage stress, increased saving, credit card debt, and increased inequality. So, yay. This trend sucks. And it's quite a big force to be reckoned with. So I think that the headlines here are reduced spending, delayed purchases, and rise of the side hustle. So with these trends, I've noticed that I'm calling it a force. A force meaning we may not necessarily have a lot of influence over it, but it is putting force on our business environment. Now, we may choose to run experiments to deal with this, or we may need to take action to insulate and protect ourselves against this particular force. And it's a force that is not necessarily positive in most of the businesses that are coming along to the conclave. So, yeah, bummer one to start with. Okay, so we'll move on to another one, which isn't that optimistic either. But it is what it is. And it's the climate news. Actually, there is opportunity in this one. But there's also a lot of forces over which we have very little influence in our individual part of the world. So with the climate news, general concerns for all businesses, we've got concerns about our carbon footprint. If you're not concerned about your carbon footprint, you may well have to be eventually, because there is draft legislation coming about having to account for our carbon expenditure. And we'll see what happens with the federal election, if that happens next year, around that, whether they bring in such legislation or whether the Greens can do it in their part of the world in terms of application of pressure in the government. So carbon accounting will become something to contend with. Climate risk management. So, for example, in AgriFutures, which is sending a team along next week, environmental pressures are huge in their sector. So people growing food are at the complete mercy and have to work in lockstep with the environment to produce the food that we eat and the food and products that we use. So climate risk management is important. Environmental regulations and community expectations. That's been on the rise for some time now. Are you a good environmental manager in your business? How much do you need to care? How much should you care? Well, if you don't care, you may be forced to care with changes in legislation, as I mentioned. Headlines for agribusiness: climate change impacts, water scarcity, soil health, and consumer demand for sustainable and local produce is all stuff that we might need to contend with in our sector in agribusiness. In social services, I'm looking at you, Karolika, that's drug and alcohol rehab. We're looking at climate change and mental health. Lots of extreme weather events can cause climate-related stress and exacerbated mental health issues, including substance abuse. So you might have a rise in people needing your services. So you might need to change, maybe thinking about how you need to respond to some of these particular pressures and stressors that will affect your clients. Another opportunity, though, is ecotherapy. If you haven't already incorporated that, I know you've built some lovely gardens, which is helpful for some of the people, some of your clients on different areas. So incorporating nature-based activities that can help with rehabilitation while we still have a good climate where we can do that. So in my dystopian futures, in my novel work, the climate is not that friendly. And being outside is not a good experience because it's too damn hot. We're not there yet. So thankfully. So hopefully we can use being out in the wilderness or out in nature as a helpful therapy to people in substance abuse situations. And then sustainability and operations. And that means, and this sort of applies across to all businesses, environmental impact through energy efficiency, waste reduction, and sustainable procurement. So looking at your supply chain, how green is your supply chain? We don't have anybody in construction, but we do have hospitality. That is the tradies coming along next week. Things that from a climate news perspective, looking at food waste reduction, of course, because that minimizes then our carbon impact as well as our financial losses. Sustainable sourcing is on the rise in terms of customers caring about that sort of thing. Energy and water conservation and eco-friendly packaging is all stuff that clusters around that. In professional services, we have a couple from their RSM, remote work and reduced commuting. It's a perennial one at the moment. Can you reduce your carbon imprint by traveling less? Having a paperless office, sustainable procurement, again, and environmental consulting. So offering expertise in that is definitely on the rise. So some general concerns for all businesses. We've got carbon footprint, climate risk management, environmental regulations, making sure we're staying on top of that, and community expectations. So what'll be interesting once we go through all this, these are all important. How much of a priority are they for you and your business coming into 2025 is the strategic decision you'll have to make. But you don't have to decide right now. We go through the environmental scan, and then we'll do the futures triangle and the CLA to help you figure out where your priorities sit. All right. So looking at the next political trend, which is fences, not bridges. So this is where I should have maybe reordered these because these are bummer ones. Populism and nationalism on the rise around the world. Yeah, that means it's, not in my backyard kind of isms. It's looking after our own people, keeping the others, whoever the others are, labeled out. It's polarization in our political discourse. It's economic deglobalization, which moves right into protectionism and rise of tariffs, which increases prices to people on the ground. So increasing the cost of living pressures. And this is, okay, here's a little bright spark. The rise of independence in the political atmosphere. So I flag this as a positive because it means that we are willing to challenge the status quo of our political system and our governance system as a result. So there is this little wave of change that's circulating out there, and it's gaining traction, which means that we don't have to get stuck with the default systems and policies that we've had forever. We can actually make a difference. And it's really uplifting to see this political change happening in front of our eyes, especially if anybody else feels a little bit stuck or at the whim of all these other political pressures outside of us. I'm thinking of the United States in particular, waiting for the election outcome, which we'll know, hopefully, mostly next week. Depends. It depends on what happens, if they all get out to vote and how close it is and all that stuff. Frank, I'm just going to mute you unless you've muted yourself. Okay, thank you. All right, so back to, that was political trends. So there's a summary of that fabulous stuff. And on to trend number 4. And this is an opportunity or a threat, and it's exponential me. This is kind of fun, this one, actually. So this one is fun because, well, I think it's fun because I'm sort of obsessed with different aspects of this. Digital experiences. There is an interesting statistic here. Is the demand for personalized digital experiences has a global market value of, scratch your pencil, sharpen your pencil, an estimated value last year in 2023 of $18.19 billion. What the? So what is a personalized digital experience? It means it's your customized Siri answering your particular questions. It's your chat GPT customizing and tailoring its responses specific to you. It's the chat bot that is helping you get a customized experience at the interface of a business. So there's some key drivers around this. Things like high definition graphics, artificial reality, virtual reality, and AI are making things more realistic and lifelike. So We want more tailored customer experiences in everything from customer service, entertainment, healthcare, and education. And technology is allowing us to do that. So I have on my phone an app. What the hell is it called, actually? I don't know what it's called. My Net Diary. Yeah. Okay. My Net Diary. In that, I can put all of my physical statistics, my goals, my health goals, and it can, and my food preferences and restrictions, and it can custom make recommendations for me. That's so cool, right? So instead of going to a specialist, a human, I can do it through an app, and this will be on the rise. How accurate is it? Could be better, but it can give me real time suggestions and recommendations. And ChatGPT can do that. You can do that. You can put all your preferences and restrictions and goals into ChatGPT and ask for a personalized menu for the evening. Ta-da, in 30 seconds. So this is a massive social trend. How is it going to affect your business? Well, are you offering tailored customer experiences that add value to them? It's something that's really fascinating. A couple of other cool things, which may or may not be of use to you, are things like the voice cloning market. So you can clone your voice, which means you just do a little snippet and all of a sudden you can put in text and it will speak in your voice, which is really cool. Character AIs, where you can film yourself, create a digital video avatar of your voice and face and hand movements, upload a text, and it will present a video. So instead of me showing up live on this webinar, I could have just written out the script, plugged in my digital avatar, and then just done that presentation. So the advantage of that as a producer or as a content creator is save so much time and energy. B, the research says that for CEOs who are using that to send out their weekly messages and even declare that it's their avatar doing the weekly messages, is that the people receiving the message don't care that it's a digital avatar of the CEO. You might think, oh, but it's so not genuine, it's not authentic. They don't care. But what they do care about is the intention to connect weekly. And if it's faster and easier for the CEO to use their digital avatar to record a message that they've drafted, probably using ChatGPT or Copilot to produce it, that's helpful because it means they're getting information they may not otherwise have had because it would have taken the CEO an hour to produce that video, customize it, script it, all that kind of stuff. So, opportunity or threat, you decide. Okay, so there's lots of ethical concerns and stuff to be mindful of. Here we go. The social trends: digital avatars, voice clones, chatbots, and virtual influencers. Virtual influencers, yeah. Misinformation and manipulation is the obvious one there. Privacy concerns and job displacements. So, yeah, I'm using fewer professionals in my content production because of these tools. It means I can produce more, though. So, is that good or is bad? Well, some win, some lose, right? I think that's an interesting one to consider. So, there's opportunities and threats in that particular one. And there's the statistic I read out for you, the $18.19 billion in digital avatar demand last year, and it's rising. Fifth trend is cyber warriors. So also, this has been a hot topic. We've got cybersecurity, generative AI, and AI agents all on the rise. So with the cyber threat landscape, it's quite interesting. There's more and more sophisticated attacks. I'm sure you're getting the texts on your phone that say, hey, notification, check your MyGov something with a link in there, or definitely through the email. All that kind of stuff it's annoying, but it's there. And some people have lost a lot of money with those ones. So there's other types of attacks are supply chain attacks. So targeting vulnerabilities in third-party vendors, that's a threat to us. Exploiting human error. 88% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. And organizations, smart ones, are running sort of red teams around this. Can they tempt their people to click on a link to see how vulnerable the anti-cybercrime practices are? And yeah, it's still happening. And there's mobile malware. There's all a bunch of stuff that's pretty scary stuff. So a couple of key focus areas for businesses is generative AI. If you're using it, what are the risks associated with that, including deep fakes and AI, what's that called? Catastrophizing? Hallucinations. That's right. Hallucinations and malware. Supply chain security and embedded cybersecurity. Embedded cybersecurity is an important aspect of our systems. Okay, page 6. Here we go. All right. Here's this. Look at these statistics. Phishing attacks still the most common cyber attack. 39.6% of all email threats. So that's the dodgy ones. Hey, I'm a prince from Saudi Arabia, and I need you to help me get something. Or I'm from those old ones that have been doing the traps. Yep, they're still there. Or I had one today from Google experts saying, hey, would you like us to help you implement all the AI stuff? And I had to just pause because it had it looked like a message from Google. The telltale, though, was the web address was xmy.google.com. I'm like, okay, so yeah, you're phishing. Delete. Thank you very much. But it's easy if you're rushing that you might click that and then you're gone. And the other one, cybersecurity workforce, growing rapidly with 5.5 million workers in 2023. So there's the opportunity. There is a future in cybersecurity, and I don't think that's going away. Okay, so we are looking at now workforce welfare. This is where we're getting into the ones that are hot topics for most of the organizations that are coming along to the conclave. Now, someone's put something in chat. I'm just going to make sure I'm not missing something. Sarika, I had a relevant experience on the iconic clothing website recently where it asked more personalized questions aside from bust, weight, hip measurements to determine the actual size that worked for me based on my fit preference, torso proportion. Sarika, are you there? Can you unmute?
I am, yes. I missed the start, so I didn't know what the rules were around unmuting myself and making comments.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. So tell us what happened.
Well, where you normally go to that, you pick an item and you go, oh, what size should I get? Oh, this is the size that I normally get. But the real female problem is this size 8 the same as other size 8s?
Yeah.
So you go to that size guide, but rather than going to the size guide, I think there's like a find the fit for me button, and I was like, okay, well, we'll click on this, and it put you through a series of questions where it asks for your height, your weight, and age. Although it seemed to think it could figure out changes in weight distribution if it knew your age, but then it would ask are you slender? Are you slightly more curvy? Do you prefer your clothes to fit average, loose, tighter, and based off all that and what it probably knew, or I hope that it knows about the item of clothing in question's fit, it selected the size that it thinks might be right for you, which I've never had that experience when shopping for clothes online, which I don't tend to like to do for all those reasons that you just have no idea.
Yeah, you don't want to know where your bust size is going into some weird portal. But it's an example of individual customized experience. And if you layer onto that some new technology, which is VR technology, where they get you to take a picture and then they can project the actual clothing onto the picture of your body to see how it looks. So that's technology already out there, but not everybody's adopted that. But it makes it so much easier, right? It makes, it helps make the shopping experience less stressful and easier for you to make choices.
Yeah, I feel like it may not solve some of the world's big problems, but it's some of that technology in sort of action.
Well, no, that's right. It seems like, but that's our lives, right? We have big picture issues like climate change to contend with, and we have day-to-day life admin to deal with. And technology can be applied against all of those challenges. So I don't think we need to be dismissive of that.
Well, the outcome was, oh, that's kind of cool. I think I might give it a go based off what it's recommended and see what happens.
That's right. So now you gave some money to an organization and helped an organization produce a product which generated profits and kept people employed. So it's all contributing in that way as well as making your life happier. All right. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Where are we up to? Oh, yes. slide. Trend number 6, organizational trends, workforce welfare. Yes, this is a big one. I know that AgriFutures has been dealing with some of this. So what is this all about? Well, this is about, the conversation is, how responsible are we all for well-being at work? And there's a lot of changes happening out there. Basically, there's the no contact rule that came out, changes in the Fair Work Act in 2009. And it means that you shouldn't have to be engaged in work-related communications outside of your work hours, including emails, calls, texts, and any work-related messaging platforms. Now, I know, speaking to a lot of leaders, they're like, yeah, what planet do they fall off? Like, the work is so much that it bleeds all over the place. And all of us have been working really hard to create boundaries in our workplaces, but to have a no contact rule is perhaps naive and difficult to implement. So what they're trying to do is to rein back the blowover of poor boundaries around that, where bosses do text and expect responses at 11 p.m., 1 a.m., that kind of thing. So because there's been weak boundaries around it, there has been abuse. So they're trying to put some hard boundaries around it. And in any case, it kind of points to the next trend, which is the changes to health and work health and safety, which is organizations being responsible for psychosocial hazards in the workplace. This is really interesting legislation. So what are psychosocial hazards that could cause harm to workers? They include things like high job demands. And that means excessive workload, unrealistic deadlines, long hours. So that's pretty much every leader I ever work with. Low job control. This is lack of autonomy, inflexible work arrangements. So being told what you need to do all the time. Micromanagement fits into there too. Poor support, lack of support from supervisors or colleagues, poor workplace relationships. So we're talking culture here. If there's toxic culture, this is a psychosocial hazard. And so leaders are now being told to be held account legally for that with this new psychosocial hazard laws coming through. The obvious ones: bullying, harassment, and discrimination are psychosocial hazards. Violence and aggression, obvious one. Traumatic events or material. So at the moment, organizations are trying to figure out how do we respond to this? How do we identify the hazards that we've got? What's normal, what's regular workplace load, and what's not regular workplace load, and how do we manage all of that? So what does the legislation require? It says duty of care. So like with physical hazards, employers have a duty of care to identify, assess, and manage these psychosocial risks. And it means taking steps to eliminate or minimize these risks as far as is reasonably practicable. So how do you translate that is the big thing that leaders are contending with. And consultation. Employers must consult with workers around and the representatives when looking at those particular psychosocial hazards, because what's a hazard for one person is not a hazard for another, or you might have missed one. Okay, here we go. So the focus is on prevention. So preventing yourselves from having a toxic culture in the workplace, having systems that encourage reasonable management of workload and feedback loops to help address any issues as they come up, so things don't turn sour before you address them. And training and awareness. So that's a massive one. And I would say 100% of the organizations coming to the Leadership Conclave would have to address this particular trend as part of their 2025 response.
Yeah.
Okay, so who needs to be muted? Frank. Muting you again, Frank. Okay. So the organizational trends, forgot to mention this one, remote versus hybrid. Yep. We're still having that conversation. It's not yet resolved. What does that mean? How are we all in the workplace all the time? Is it some days? When is it? How do we put boundaries around that? How do we make it work effectively for deliverables, accountability, as well as team development, innovation, and collaboration? The right to disconnect and psychosocial hazard was the other stuff that I mentioned. So it's an opportunity as well as a threat. I mean, I think if leaders and their teams worked on developing robust, happy, healthy cultures, that's a good thing, right? And if we resolve the remote versus hybrid tension and people are happier with that, that is also a good thing. And if we had stronger boundaries in place around what's appropriate after hours connection, that's all good stuff. So I think that's an opportunity as opposed to a threat. And the last trend we're looking at, ethical ecosystems. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned a little bit, it kind of ties into the first one and one of the first ones around environmental hazards. And these are ethical trends. These are long-standing ones. Environmental social governance issues, ESG. This is used to be called corporate social responsibility or triple bottom line. How are we managing that? How are we navigating that? And DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. You can add the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, JEDI. I like that acronym. And that's still an issue. In fact, DEI initiatives are on the decline, probably because of the rise of the other priorities that we mentioned already, which is the economic, the climate squeeze and the, what did I call it? The big squeeze and the climate noose. And the third thing I think around on this ethical trends list is the supply chain transparency. So how are you doing with your carbon footprint? Is everybody else in your supply chain ethical? Are you making ethical choices around that? I think there's an opportunity in here for us to make better choices that have positive effects, not only for our reputation, which is the superficial reason for this, but for the good of the planet and the good for the community. So here's the summary here. And I've reordered them a little bit. The ones in red, I think, are the ones that are of significance for pretty much all the organizations, though you might have different priorities. And I think they're more of a threat / opportunity that we can be responsive to and we can influence and take advantage of. The ones rimmed in black are forces over which we have probably less of an influence and probably need to contend with. That's the big squeeze, climate news, fences, not bridges, and ethical ecosystem. So with all that in mind, that's going to be the starting point of the Leadership Conclave when we come together next week in terms of this is the big picture, some of the things that we need to reply to, and then we'll be diving into using the futures triangle, as I mentioned, and the CLA, causal layered analysis, to dive a little bit deeper into your particular organizational context and industry. And then from that, we'll surface what are the key issues that we need to respond to. And then we will design experiments. Aha. Yes, very exciting. So I picked sort of 4 areas: exponential me, cyber warriors, and workplace wellness and ethical ecosystem, with some questions for you to ponder as we go into the conclave. And I will summarize all this. You'll get the recording of this webinar as well as the notes, so you can scroll through these and review them before you come along next week. And these are some of the questions you might consider. I'll read them out in case you can't read the screen wherever you are. So exponential me, these are good strategic questions we can ask about how we might respond to this particular trend. How might we use digital avatars to connect better with our clients or customers? How might we improve our communication with staff to be more transparent and up to date? How might we use technology to position ourselves better in the market? Those are some sample strategic questions we might ask. So what I'm doing here is demonstrating thinking in questions as opposed to thinking in solutions. So when you start to ask better questions about these trends, it sort of surfaces potential opportunities for you. In Cyber Warriors, we've got what are some processes that are currently laborious and how might we use AI tools, agents to streamline these workflows? Number 2 is how might we reach more customers or stakeholders using digital technology? How might we improve our technological security, privacy, and manage more risks? For me, that's a big glaring one. I think my cybersecurity, that's a priority for me. I need to upgrade a whole bunch of stuff there. For workplace wellness, which is a hot topic and of relevance to all of you, how might we boost the resilience of team members? How might we manage workload and workflow better? How might we boost our culture's psychological safety? How can we encourage team members to speak up more and provide ideas and solutions? Those are some sample questions we might use to surface some potential experiments in response to this trend. And the last one, ethical ecosystem. How might we implement ESG principles into our work? How might we measure our social and environmental impact? How can we improve our social and environmental impact? How might we partner with others to advance a social or environmental cause we care about? And how might we become more transparent about our business operations, impact, supply chain management? So here are some sample strategic questions for you to engage with. Phew, oh my goodness. That was a massive one-way download, I'm aware, for this webinar. Not very interactive, and normally it's a lot more engaging, but I did know there was a lot of content I wanted to deliver for you. Now, many of you have carved out time to be here this afternoon. You may have questions or observations that would be useful to ask right about now. So you can either unmute yourself or pop it into the chat box, and feel free to add a comment in the chat box if you don't have a question, or ask a question or an observation. And if there's any trends you think, oh, she didn't mention blah, and that's a big one, that's also useful. And it might be one that's specific to your industry. So if you've got something that you'd like to share, now is the time. This is where I give you a moment to think and fill the airwaves with. I should have had my chicken, but I have chickens packed for a workshop I'm doing tomorrow. All right, so failing comment or questions, I will check in with those who have audio and ask you for what was of interest to you. So this is how I'm going to get feedback before we wrap up. So I'm going to have to change my display here. Yeah, how do I do that? I think I have to do it this way. Okay, so Tristan, I'm going to come to you first.
Hi.
Hi, Tristan. Nice to see you.
You too. I'm really curious about the exponential me stuff.
Yeah.
Like I find all the, generative AI and digital kind of experiences and all that kind of thing really interesting, and speaks to different levels of people at different stages of
It's definitely, I'm definitely on the AI optimistic and AI positive brand of or gamut, and I see lots of opportunity there, and try not to get hysterical about the threats. And I think there is opportunity if we can manage the threats along the way. Yeah. But the digital avatar stuff is pretty cool, as well as the service-based AI agents, which if they could hurry up and do that, that would be awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, and Amanda.
Thanks, Zoe. I'm also interested in that digital avatar space, particularly some of the things you were talking about with mimicking your own voice.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the workforce, so that hybrid versus workplace, and the impacts of the psychosocial hazards work. So just keeping everyone happy, safe, and keeping the work progressing and being done.
It's a perennial challenge and something that I've spent my life dedicated to try and solve. And there's new challenges all the time with that. And legislation, I think, will just nudge us along. But if we can work on our cultures and the way that we work together, that's good. And I'm hoping my next book, Power Games, which I'm really enjoying now. I avoided it for so long. I've been thinking about it for years and then started finally working on it. I'm like, oh, this is so useful for folks. And I will be touching on some of the research and tools during our session next week. So you'll get a little magical preview. All right. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, Rebecca.
Hey, firstly, thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of information there that is exciting and scary at the same time. Yeah. I did use an AI agent to change an appointment I had the other day, and it was really weird. Like, so they were confirming, oh, you want to cancel this and rebook this, and we don't have that time. And it was useful, but it just was quite scary knowing other times I'd be on the phone to a person that, sat behind a desk. And what's come up for me the most is workforce welfare. Workforce culture is a huge thing I like to support and be part of working with, and looking at how we can bring everyone on board for that, to keep them as safe and as involved at creating that safe space for themselves to work in as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear more about your agent thing. That sounds really fascinating. I've yet to see anybody do it in practical, so I'm like, oh, you've done it. Cool.
It was good.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing about that. Okay. Anna.
Hi, Zoe. Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with Bex. Lots of information. Exciting and scary. She summed it up. I think I'm interested in the AI, but I lean on the other side, and I go into cybersecurity when I think of AI.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'm reading a book at the moment, and it's just a novel. It's a don't think about anything related to work novel. And the criminals are actually using AI to hide their personality in their text and their emails, so they can't be tracked by FBI and CIA and all that, because they're the English gentleman, friendly English gentleman voice, or the Frenchman voice. And so they change it up so they can't be tracked. So that's a little scary.
Yeah.
And I've always lent on the cyber security stuff, very interested in it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we should all be interested.
Somebody knew the book. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. We solve murders. I think it's a great observation, is because with any technology, there'll be opportunists with low morals taking advantage of it. And the scary part of my power games research is that 4 in 100 people will be narcissists and excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully didn't do that into the microphone. 4 in 100 people will be narcissists and psychopaths. So in an organization of 100, which is not that big an organization, you can have 4 assholes essentially to deal with. And that's a lot. You think, who are these people? Well, they're more prevalent than we know out there. So they're always going to be out there. They're assholes because they don't have the right biochemistry and capacity for empathy, and they take advantage of people. That's what a psychopath is. They don't have any empathy, and so they can see opportunities and don't care about the morals of it. They understand emotions and they use them to their advantage, which is one of the sobering things I discovered in writing power games. As much as I want to help organizations build better teams and better cultures and help people feel more powerful, we still have to contend with those 4 in 100 and sort of the long spectrum between. So the idea of the cybersecurity threats, you're not wrong to be concerned about that. And we need to be mindful of that. I think we can be optimistic and hopeful and excited and temper that with really good guardrails. I think there's a bit of both. So thank you for sharing. Dawn, how about you? Dawn's on mute.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Find the icon. Look, there's several interesting things in there for me. And of course, it's very topical with the digital experiences and how we incorporate the AI and those kind of things into our business, and how we utilise that well, and what that means for our workforce, and what kind of work does that take over, and what is left. So it's those kind of things. And there was a recent podcast on the ABC listen up about that very thing and what kind of work, you know, how the work is then shared from people to systems and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's very interesting. And it also then feeds into the financial squeeze as well, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is the cost of that, and how, you know, what kind of cost is that, both human and financial, to incorporate the use of, you know, all of the things that can help us into our business.
It's all interconnected. And even though I list them as 7 discrete spheres, they are all interconnected. And the 7 different categories are there to help make a little sense of what's going on. But yeah, AI, there'll be winners and losers, and there'll be opportunities as well as threats. And this is the strategic part. We need to be mindful of what those could be and explore what those could be, and protect ourselves against that as much as we can. Insulate ourselves, I think.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dawn. Sarika.
I can't quite pinpoint one that is most interesting, but I had picked up on how they seem like those spheres. Some of them are quite interconnected. I think the exponential me one, I'm most curious about that sphere, and thinking about how some of the strategic questions that you posed there at the end, how we can use that to to provide customers with the best experience. And it might not necessarily be purchasing a product, but part of a service, part of information that they receive. So I'm interested in that sphere.
Awesome. Those are great questions to keep in mind, because that may turn into an experiment for you.
I also think the example that you gave about a company's CEO, managing director, using an avatar to provide a weekly update, but quite interesting. But the thing that you said that got me thinking was, if you're upfront, your staff or the audience might not care that it was generated this way, but understanding what people care about more, is it getting that communication each week as opposed to where it comes from or how it's generated. I think that was there was just an interesting question, just another lens to apply.
That's right. I found that research quite interesting. It's like, if people know ahead of time, they're less bothered. If they discover afterwards, that's when people get pissed. All right, Sharon, where did you go? There you are.
Thank you. There was a lot in all of them, thinking a little bit more than the usual stuff around workforce and risk and those sorts of things. I'm thinking as well about, from an organisation's perspective, some of the extra work that we might need to do and the costs associated with things like the environmental regs, and how might that apply to an organisation like our own, given that we have funding to deliver services, but there are these other business kind of demands or expectations, and does that apply to us, and how do we do that? But aside from the trends, what I'm really excited about is, and we tried this at our board previously, is to think about strategy, not about strategic plan. And I'm really keen to get more of that thinking around the strategic intentions, those other things that you were talking about. And yes, looking at the trends, but how to make that shift from, and here's a strategic plan being the outcome. Yes, there'll be plans and there'll be other things, but how are we actually getting the board and others thinking with those other intents? And we did try that, a strategy rather than a plan, and it had mixed success. So I'm looking forward to some of that and bringing the learnings from the conclave back to the board and others to think about how we might approach it next year when we do that work, which is environmental scan, as well as all of these broader trends that you're talking about. So it's great timing for us.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think I should clarify one thing. We don't want to throw out the plan, and I don't think you were saying that. I think if we invest too much in the plan, like this is our path, then we miss all the other strategic thinking, which supports the implementation of the plan. And our thinking needs to be adaptive, and therefore the plan needs to be adaptive. So I think that's where organizations and leaders can get derailed. It's like, we set the plan, we need to deliver that. And yet stuff changes, which means we need to change the plan. That's more of what I had had meant when we talked about strategic intent. Like we have the big picture, and we need to have this discipline of bringing new thinking, fresh thinking, and analysis and learning, this kind of feedback loop of what's out there, what are we learning, how are we growing, and is our project plan still fit for purpose, or do we need to adopt it or adapt it? And it's harder because how do you fit accountability into that? And I think that's another big question around measures. And it's not just about delivering a project, it's about, are we progressing towards this vision? That's sort of where the measures become strategic as well. All right. Thank you, Sharon. Now, Jude, I know, is driving, so she can't speak. Frank is on his phone, so I'm not. Oh, are you there, Frank?
Yes, I can't get the video, but I think you probably summed it up in the last minute or so, or 30 seconds, Zoe, about sort of the impact of just refreshing, being mindful, and how we implement that in our day-to-day activities at work. And like I said, we've got a plan, but we've got to probably be, pivot, or whatever the new word is, to kind of adapt to what the new trends are. So I think you probably summed it up in the last 30 seconds and 40 seconds, what you said. Thank
you, Frank. Yes, it's being adaptable. Definitely, I've seen that in my own business. What used to work really well no longer works. And it's kind of like, come on, what the? I have to do some thinking, do something new. Oh my God. That's hard. It's hard when you're busy trying to deliver day-to-day work, to press pause and to rethink your strategy and to come up with new approach. That's the work. That's the strategy work. That's the big picture strategic thinking work. And that's what leaders sign up for, is to help bear the load of thinking above, raising our heads above the parapet and seeing what's going on out there. I mean, for our firm, we're probably blessed that we have the resources, the things that you talked about, an avatar. We've got somebody already doing that for our firm, where you got this avatar there talking and sending a message and asking questions. So we're kind of blessed we have the resources to start adapting these AI kind of initiatives or technology. That's fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to, I'll check out your website and see if I can see that before we meet up next week. I think I've got everybody. Did I miss anyone? If I have, please unmute yourself. I think I did get everybody though. Yeah. Okay. Well, that went exactly to time. I'm amazed that I'm spot on. I thought it would be a lot earlier, but thank you all for coming along this afternoon. I will send you the recording. I'll send you my notes so that you have all of that in order to mull and munch over before we come together next week. Friday, the 8th of November, we'll be kicking off at 9:30. Come earlier if you want to. It's those of you who've been out there know how beautiful Kapakambalong is, and it's nice to come and get your coffee and just enjoy the beautiful homestead and the environment out there, the beautiful gardens and the view down to the river and the hills beyond. It's a nice place to spend the day. It really is conducive to doing different kinds of thinking. And if you've got any questions in the meantime between now and then, please sing out. I'll send some more information next week, just a little reminder about where we're going and what we're doing. Otherwise, I'll see you a week Friday on the 8th of November, and I'm really super looking forward to it. Thank you for your participation. Have a great rest of your evening. Thank you. Thanks, Zoe. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Zoe. See you.